Well, it's misty and murky this morning. Perfect for what I've got in mind. I'm down on the coast, a place called B Sands, which is not far from home. I've been here before, and I think I've done a couple of videos on this place before, but I make no apologies for coming back because it's quite a nice little shot down here. I've come down this morning with my 6x17 camera, my film camera. And I'm starting off a little project with black and white film, long exposures, nice and moody, and very sort of minimalist. I'm shooting Ilford Delta 100, and I'm going to be using some ND filters to try and extend exposure. The sea is a little bit calm this morning. I was hoping for it to be a bit more choppy, but I'm thinking kind of exposure wise anything from 30 seconds upwards, ideally around a minute, so it flattens everything out. And normally the water rushes around the steps where I'm going to shoot from, so that's the plan this morning. There's no sunlight at all, which is good, because the dawn light, it's quite early in the morning at the moment, the dawn light comes up over the horizon. I didn't want any light in the shot, so it's very minimalist, very sort of arty this morning. Well, I've timed this to coincide with high tide this morning. It's looking quite nice down here actually. There's a little bit of a swell in the sea, so should be enough to kind of create some movement that I'm after. I've got no danger of any sort of direct sunlight coming out, so that's pretty good. And you can see these timbers here, really sort of old weathered timbers. It's going to look really nice in black and white, nice contrast. So I'm going to set up fairly low, and with this format, obviously because it's quite wide, I want to try and create this lead-in effect. So I'm going to have to shoot quite a small aperture, because a lot of this is going to run from each side of the shot. So it's going to require quite a lot of depth of field. So, as I thought, I'm going to have to stop down to f45 to get the depth of field that I require here. Because of these railings and the way they lead in either side of the shot, it's quite close to the camera. So obviously, to get the depth of field from here right through to the end, it requires quite a small aperture. I've focused about a third of the way in, and then I've stopped down through the apertures, looking through the loop. And I can see when I get to f45 everything becomes sharp, so that's going to create a long exposure anyway, but I'm also going to use an ND filter just to extend exposure even more. The tide's still coming in, and it's nice because it's actually washing over this jetty part of the steps here, so I think with a long exposure it should create the effect that I'm after. So filtration wise, I'm not using a grad or a polarizer, it's literally just going to be an ND filter. So I'll do my meter readings in a minute and figure out the exposure time. Polarizer, it could work, but what it does, it cuts out the glare on the water, but I want that reflection in the water, in the surface, just to record any sort of ambient light, and also it gives it a better sort of effect. So that's the plan. I'm not sure which ND to use yet until I've metered the scene. Obviously shooting at f45, it's going to be a long exposure anyway. It's a 100 speed film, so with the small aperture and that sort of ISO, it's going to be in the seconds anyway, so we shall see. The metering wise, it's fairly straightforward this morning. Obviously this is the main part of the scene that I want to be exposed correctly. So I'm going to meter off the water just past the end of the steps here, which gives me a nice base reading. So I'm shooting at f45, so my meter reading, pump that up to f45, gives me half a second at f45. Now I've got to work out now what exposure I want to create using my ND filters. I'm probably going to use a 10 stop, but we shall see. I'll try them out in a minute. So my meter reading, my base reading is half a second at f45. I'm using a 6 stop filter. Now when I create the exposure, that'll give me around 30 seconds exposure. Now there's a couple of things I use, obviously just counting up basically, so 6 stops away from half a second. But I also use a reciprocity timer app on my phone, which is quite handy. You can dial in the film type, film speed, any filtration that you use, and obviously reciprocity failure as well if it's an issue. And then it calculates the exposure, gives you a little timer as well. But I'm going to set these settings in, so f45. I'm going to use the camera on the lens on bulb mode. So basically open the shutter, count, or use a timer, my little stopwatch on my phone, and just create the exposure. So basically using in bulb mode, ready with my timer, lens is cocked, wait for the wave to come up over, and start the exposure. So that gives me a countdown. I'm doing a 1 minute exposure now. So obviously the lens and the shutter's open on a cable release. So it's recording all that movement. So just keep an eye on my timer. It's quite relaxing shooting like this. Just hoping that it comes out. Should be fine. It's got even more misty now, so it's looking quite moody. And I think with black and white, it'll definitely sort of improve this. Give you lots of contrast in the scene here. So just counting down the last 10 seconds now. So on the cable release, I've got a little catch on there. So when it gets, here we go, when it gets to the end of the exposure, just click that. There we go, and that's the exposure done. Wind the film on. And on to the next one. So that's 2 shots I've done now with the 6 stop filter. Now I think I did 30 seconds and 1 minute. And I think those are probably enough, but I am going to try a 10 stop filter as well, just to see the difference. There's a nice swell coming in now, so I think it will give it even more of a, create more of the effect that I'm after. So just about to start with my 10 stop filter now. This is an 8-minute exposure. So I'll trip this off, then I'm going to have a little chat about fine art. So this little project I'm doing, let's have a chat about that. It's basically going to be, say, long exposures, nice and moody. Now, there is this kind of debate about fine art photography. Now, this is a personal view, and I'll probably get, like, you know, get some comments on this, but I don't actually think you can class things as fine art in photography. Not this type of thing. It's just because I'm using like a big film camera and long exposures, and it's all blurry and all that sort of thing. Does that make it fine art? I'm not so sure. Maybe in 100 years, when I'm worm food, you know, somebody might come across my work and think, you know, pay thousands of pounds for it. But I think at the end of the day, it's just a photograph. Whether you can tag it as a fine art photograph is debatable. I personally don't think you can. You know, what makes this fine art rather than something shot digitally, you know, the same frame? It just doesn't make sense to me. So, you know, it's a very sort of fine line between fine art and just a normal photograph. There are obviously classic photographs that have been taken over the years. People like Ansel Adams, for instance, you know, they used these massive cameras. They spent ages getting the shot. It was, you know, it ends up in galleries all over the place. But these days, I'm not so sure. I mean, especially digitally, I don't think things can be classed as fine art. Again, that's just a personal view. Now, this obviously involves quite a lot of work. You know, it's a big camera. It's a lot of working out exposures, time. You know, the actual physical film that it's made on, the image is made on. You know, that makes it a little bit more special. Does it add more value? Yes, I think it does. Personally, I think, you know, a film shot, especially these days, it's more tangible. You know, you can actually feel it and see it, and rather than having to click it on a screen and look at it, you know, on a computer. So yeah, I think it does. You know, film photography especially is a little bit more special. But does it class it as fine art? I'm not so sure. I'd be very interested in your comments. You know, my personal view is fine art. When I think of fine art, I think of paintings and, you know, artists in that sort of realm. But I do, you know, there are photographers that I admire that are long gone now, and, you know, their work still sort of lives on. So, you know, it is art. You know, I agree that photography is art. You know, you're actually creating something. You've got a vision in your head, and you want to put it into, you know, onto film or onto a digital sensor and create an image. So you're using light, you're using things like filters, exposure times, all that sort of thing, apertures. But yeah, you know, I'll leave it there as far as that goes. But again, like I said, I'll be very interested in your thoughts on this. So I'm going to take my last frame of the morning. It's getting a bit drizzly now, and thankfully it's not hitting the front of the lens, but I'm getting a bit wet. So I'm going to shoot one more frame, and that should be enough to get what I want from this location. As for the other shots over the coming 12 months, I've got a number of shots in mind. Most of them coastal, but a few sort of countryside shots, long exposures, black and white. So, but this is a good start to this little project this morning. So we shall see. So while my last exposure's running, I shall probably end the video now. It's been a good start to this little project. So I'm keen to see the result, see what it looks like. Again, please let me know what you think. And also on the topic of fine art, I'll be interested to know your comments. I've probably upset a few people, but you know, everybody's got their opinions. So yeah, just let me know what you think. Be interested to read the comments. But yeah, I'm going to. It's coming in a little bit wet now to this last exposure. Hopefully, it'll be okay. So thanks for watching, and I'll hopefully see you on the next video.